website, Responding to Fascism in Europe. The UU Service Committee was born in this particular time period, in this particular project. So this is going back to talk about that. In its present-day website, the UU Service Committee is still very much a going concern. Both Unitarians and Universalists watch with apprehension the rise of Hitler and fascism in post-World War I Europe. At the annual meeting of the American Unitarian Association, that's AUA, before the Unitarians and Universalists merged in 1961 with two separate denominations, the AUA, in May of 1933, the year Hitler took power, the convention passed a resolution stating that Unitarians, quote, greatly deplore the persecution of Jews in Germany as a violation of equity, tolerance, and humanity, end quote. 2 years later, the Universalist General Convention adopted a resolution expressing sympathy for the persecuted Jews in Nazi Germany and noting their, quote, abhorrence of religious and economic persecution, unquote. These concerns were not generally shared in the then isolationist United States, where anti-Semitism was widespread. In October 1938, following the approval of the Munich Treaty by Germany, France, England, and Italy, Hitler annexed the portion of Czechoslovakia known as the Sudetenland. The Unitarian leadership was stunned by the betrayal of a model democratic state, whose First Lady, Charlotte Masaryk, was a Unitarian from New York. Moreover, the denomination had close ties to Czech Unitarians and to members of the liberal National Czechoslovak Church. The desire to do something was strong, and in December, this is 1938, the board of directors of the AUA approved the plan of Dr. Robert Dexter, director of the AUA's Department of Social Relations, for a, quote, service mission to Czechoslovakia. The Sharps War. I hope that many of you got a chance to watch the documentary called Defying the Nazis, The Sharps War, this week on public television. It will be on again tonight on a channel called WGBH World, according to the WGBH website. And also, if you go to that website, you can actually watch the whole thing on your computer in your own time. The documentary was co-produced by Ken Burns, a well-known filmmaker, and Artemis Joukowsky, who is the grandson of Waitstill and Martha Sharp. It details the story of the Sharps' efforts starting in 1939 to rescue as many people as they could who were threatened by the Nazis. I'll briefly sketch the story for those of you who didn't see the film, and then offer some reflections on today's context, in today's context. Every year in June, we celebrate the Flower Communion in honor of Norbert Chapek, who was minister of the Unitarian Church in Prague, Czechoslovakia, in the late 1930s, and who later was murdered by the Nazis at Auschwitz. What I didn't realize until I started looking into this history is that Dr. Chapek's church in the late 1930s was the largest Unitarian church in the world. I also did not realize he had strong ties to the leadership of the American Unitarian Association. In 1938, Hitler had threatened total European war unless the great powers agreed to his desire to annex the Sudetenland, an area of Czechoslovakia which was home to many ethnic Germans. In the Munich Treaty of 1938, England, France, and Italy agreed to this demand, thinking it would buy peace. This great betrayal of Czech democracy alarmed Unitarians in the U.S., and none was more alarmed than Dr. Robert Dexter. From 1927, Dr. Dexter had been the head of international relations at the American Unitarian Association, and he had visited many liberal congregations in Europe. He had visited Dr. Chapek's congregation in 1937 and 38, and he wrote detailed reports on the plight of the refugees in the Sudetenland. Dr. Dexter set about finding U.S. citizens who would sign affidavits sponsoring specific Jewish refugees who wished to immigrate. He began a public campaign to ease immigration restrictions, and he started an organization to help endangered refugees and recruited financial support for it among the members of the First Church in Belmont, the church I came to serve 65 years later. The denomination in December 1938 approved Dexter's plan for a service mission to Czechoslovakia. Most of what I've just told you was not in the film, for the film starts with what happened next. Reverend Everett Baker, on behalf of Frederick May Elliott, the president of the UUA, called 17 Unitarian ministers to try to get them to volunteer for the new mission. These 17 begged off. The 18th one was Waitstill Sharp, minister of what is now the UU Society of Wellesley Hills. Waitstill and his wife Martha, who had a degree in social work, had 2 small children. You can imagine what the pressure would be for them to be the denomination's 18th refusal. Instead, they said yes, although the film makes it sound like they didn't have much choice. It is clear that they went on their own volition. The president of the AUA in 1939, like the president of the UUA in 2016, does not have the authority to order a minister to do anything like that. The Sharps arranged for their children to stay with friends in the Wellesley congregations and set sail in February 1939. Along the way to Prague, they made many contacts in England and other places to set up a network, a kind of an underground railroad. The Sharps have an entry in the Holocaust Encyclopedia, which summarizes their work in 1939 as follows. The Sharps' work was divided for the following 6 years between relief and immigration assistance. Much of their activity involved individual cases. On one occasion, however, Martha escorted 35 refugees to England. The group included journalists, political leaders, and 2 children whose parents had committed suicide. In another instance, she arranged for a group of children to leave in cooperation with the British organization called Movement for the Care of Children from Germany. On the night of March 14th, 15th, 1939, just before the Germans occupied Prague, the Sharps burned the notes they had compiled during their activities. They'd only been there a month. They stopped maintaining records. They were in greater peril when the Gestapo, the German secret state police, closed down their office at the end of July 1939. Yet they remained committed to completing their mission. Waitstill Sharp left Prague in early August 1939 for a conference in Switzerland, but was prevented from returning to the German-occupied Czech provinces. Martha left Prague alone a week later. She later learned that she had escaped arrest by the Gestapo by one day. Reunited in Paris, the couple sailed together for the United States at the end of August. Unquote. So that was the first phase of their work, and the film is largely concerned with that period. But the committee later opened an office in Lisbon, Portugal being a neutral country, and the Sharps worked out of there for several more years. In all their work, they recognized that it was not enough to help get the refugees out of Nazi territory. They had to get them in a safe country in such a way they could not be sent back. This is where the work of the UU Service Committee done in the U.S. and England paid off. At a time when many refugees were refused asylum, the ones handled by this committee seemed to resettle successfully. The encyclopedia entry I read just now notes that Martha was involved in getting a large group of children out at one time. One of the most searing images from the film is one of these children waving goodbye to their parents who would not expect to see them again. And many did not. You have to wonder what that did to Martha. Did it make her grateful to be saving these children, or regretfulness for missing the time with her own? How many people overall were rescued? Here's what the UU Service Committee's website says, quote, "The number of people rescued by USC, usually in collaboration with other agencies, has been impossible to calculate with certainty. It is probable that the number is above 1,000 and possibly as high as 3,000, unquote. Now what do we do with this? A Unitarian minister and his wife are only 2 of 5 Americans recognized by the Israelis as among the righteous among nations for this work in saving refugees from the Nazis. I think we have a right to feel proud of them and proud of the values that they embodied. They were heroic, but at the same time we don't want to worship them. I once lived to listen to a great sermon by Reverend Jane Jepka, who taught me what I know about preaching in seminary. Her sermon was on Martin Luther King Sunday, and the first half of the sermon went about listing all those qualities of Dr. King which were heroic. And then in the middle of the sermon she said something like this: "You might think Dr. King was one of the most remarkable people we have ever produced. And that would be too bad. Because the more you put him on a pedestal, the further away he is from you, or anything you might do to remedy the injustice in your world." The state of Israel inducted the Sharps into the Righteous Among Nations in 2006 after both had died. In receiving the honor on behalf of her parents, their daughter Martha said this, quote, "They were modest and ordinary people. They responded to the suffering and the needs around them, as they would have expected everyone to do in a similar situation. They never viewed what they did as extraordinary." I found that a bit hard to swallow. There weren't dozens of organizations operating underground in Europe during the war, getting in each other's way. It was extraordinarily dangerous work, and the Sharps were lucky to have stayed one step ahead of the Gestapo. If you love Casablanca, you will be reminded of it in the story of the Sharps. It's somehow satisfying to have a force of pure evil and people operating in its shadow trying to do some good. Waitstill Sharp says at one point that he didn't mind at all lying on immigration documents because he knows the system he is fighting does so much worse things. One of the side stories not covered in the film is this symbol, which hangs on the wall behind me. In the Portuguese phase of the operations, the Service Committee felt the need to have a graphic symbol that could be used on documents for people to recognize the efforts. They hired a Jewish refugee artist named Hans Deutsch, and he came up with the symbol of the flaming chalice. I'd always heard that the flaming chalice was chosen because it was somehow connected to the 15th century Czech reformer named Jan Hus, H-U-S. Hus was a proto-universalist. He wanted to serve communion to all the people. This rendered him a heretic in the eyes of the church, and he was convicted and executed. But his followers revolted, and the Hussite rebellion was the biggest revolt against the Catholic hierarchy before the Protestant Reformation a century later. The flaming chalice was used by the Service Committee in this work, and it became a symbol of that committee thereafter, and from there found its way into our churches. But back to the question of what we take out of the Sharp story. You may notice that the order of service does not contain a picture of the Sharps. I put one down front just for reference. That was not an aesthetic decision on my part, the order of service. Waitstill and Martha were both very good-looking people. No, what is depicted on the front cover is a scene in London, with Big Ben in the background and a lawn covered with life jackets. The life jackets are from the refugee crisis which is going on right now, as the residents of Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and South It is to remind us that the terrible pressure to flee one's home, to save one's life, did not end with the defeat of the Nazis. If you have the desire to roll up your sleeves and help save lives as the Sharps did, you can do it right now. There won't be any Gestapo waiting to seize you. There may be Syrian regime planes that would bomb you, as they did the relief column a week ago. I have some desire, but I also have a lot of fear. I feel called to help refugees and immigrants settle in this country and help Americans welcome and accommodate and support them. The melting pot, as I see it, is a myth. Immigrants have always pushed against American norms, and America has changed in response. This is good and healthy. This is how it should be. Do you know what school district in Massachusetts has the highest number of languages spoken by the children in their homes? It used to be Brookline. It is now Nantucket. Nantucket is experiencing a wave of immigrants from all over the world. Did you know that the most common second language among residents of Barnstable County is not Spanish, but Portuguese? I've been working with Jane Lowy over at First Parish Brewster and some other folks to put together a multi-ethnic chorus on Cape Cod. The first public sing is this afternoon at 4 at the Jewish Synagogue in Hyannis. We'll be welcoming people from the Cape Verdean community and learning some of their songs. I know that others of you have been involved in teaching English as a second language. We serve a lot of J1 students in our thrift shop. I would like to see more involvement here with helping recent immigrants adjust. I don't feel called to wade into the waters of the Mediterranean, though I'm glad that there are relief workers who do so. And I applaud the efforts of this administration, and particularly Secretary of State John Kerry, for trying to resolve the war which has generated so many of these refugees. Remember that Dr. Robert Dexter moved on many fronts in the late 30s, and one of them was advocating for more generous immigration policies. We're back there again now, with an outdated, cruel, and arbitrary immigration policy which has become a political football in the current presidential campaign. We sang this morning about walls and bridges. Couldn't be more correct than that. Here's a fight that we can enter right now. Waitstill and Martha Sharp rose to the occasion to do some good in the world they lived in. We cannot go into the hell that was Europe in that era, but we have plenty of arena for doing good ourselves in our own time and our own way. And the Sharps did pay a steep price. Martha, having distinguished herself with a daring do which would daunt James Bond for the past 6 years, was understandably reluctant to resume the role of submissive minister's wife when the war ended. Instead, she ran for Congress against her husband's explicit wishes. She lost, but she took a job in the Truman administration. Waitstill never adapted to having a liberated wife, and the couple divorced by 1954. Their marriage was not the only casualty of their wartime efforts. The children were none too happy about being foisted off on friends or relatives for months at a time. While Martha, the daughter, admires her parents, she still speaks with bitterness in the film. I want to say a few words about the film techniques. What I was really struck by was how they would take a photo of somebody from the 30s or 40s, and then that would fade, and you would see the person as he is now, he or she, talking live in color. It wasn't black and white, color. That was quite a shock, and you realize how many of these people, how happy it was that they did survive when the odds were so much against them. The music was beautiful. It was not Jacqueline's. Jacqueline played on 12 of Ken Burns' films, but this was not one of them. There was some beautiful piano and violin music the last 5 minutes when it was mostly text flashing up on the screen, but very appropriate, heart-rending music. And at the end, there's a dedication that comes on as a text. Dedicated to all those who did not survive. And what you realize is you've taken the happy stories that are to be told from this that should make you understand there's a huge iceberg of misery and horror that happened below. It's sort of like 12 years a slave. As a Southerner, descendant of slave owners, I was really made to look in that film at the brutality of slavery through the story of this person who had been a free black man in upstate New York and sold into slavery. And you cheer for him at the end when the mistake is finally rectified. He leaves the Louisiana plantation, but he leaves behind all the other slaves that he's had dealings with. They don't get to go back to New York State. And you realize that this is just showing you the huge misery that was Southern slavery for centuries. The same sort of thing that I see in this, the Sharps were able to get, and they went specifically after intellectuals and culture leaders, particularly because those are the people that are going to be most targeted by the Nazis. People who write with a free pen are going to be threats to the Nazis. Norbert Chapman being one of them, because he was the minister whose whole values were to advocate for liberality and tolerance, which is exactly what they were most threatened by. What is the larger meaning of their work? Why would anybody engage in this work? One of the most arresting parts of the film for me came when Waitstill articulated what he thought he was doing in a theological framework. It occurred in an exchange between him and the writer Leon Furtwanger, whom Sharp had just rescued. I think it'd be Furtwanger. Once they were safely on a ship out of Lisbon, bound for America, Furtwanger asked if he could interrogate Sharp as if Sharp were a character in one of Furtwanger's novels. Why are you here, doing what you're doing? How much are you paid? Is there a payoff here from some agency? Sharp replied, I'm not paid any salary at all. And I think something frightful in addition to what has befallen Europe is going to befall now. I'm not a saint. I'm just as capable of the many sins of human nature as anyone else. But I believe that the will of God is to be interpreted by the liberty of the human spirit. Well, this is a surprising answer, Furtwanger said. Do you get enough reward out of that? Sharp said, yes, I do. Our lives, including my life, and certainly my liberties, are in the hands of somebody. And I don't like to see guys pushed around, unquote. Isn't that a great Unitarian theology in a nutshell? The will of God is to be interpreted by the liberty of the human spirit. God is not a force commanding you not to sin. God is not a force saying, don't do this, don't do that. God is the liberator. God wants us to be free. For our safe perch on Cape Cod in the 21st century, we may think it cruel that the Sharps parked their children with others while doing their heroic deeds. But Waitstill, by this sentence, shows that he felt he was doing God's work. When Jesus was practicing his ministry, his disciples told him that his mother and brothers were outside and wanted to work with him. Jesus replied that the crowd around him were his mother and brothers. For whoever does God's will is my mother and brother. Elsewhere he said, whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Christian conservatives in America like to equate Christianity with what they call family values. But if you read the account of the words and deeds of Jesus in the Bible, you will see that he is anything but a family values guy. The Bible, as well as stories from many world religions, attest that the religious quest is often away from home. We have in much religious literature the archetype of the shaman, who leaves his or her home community to travel to a distant and dangerous land, contend with otherworldly forces, and return with some boon or benefit for the folks back home. The Sharps fit right into this shaman tradition. But the name of the game is not heroism. The name of the game is helping to relieve the suffering of your fellow humans in whatever way is available. How are we, today's UUs, today's heroes, going to help humanity? Amen.